Welcome to the Kelly Cardenas podcast, where attitude is everything. Today's show is going to be so epic because I actually sound like a man today. And I lost my voice. I pushed my voice I think it was 2 days ago. And I'm going to push it today, too, because I'm super excited for our guest. She is incredible. She's an author. She's a keynote speaker, blah, blah, blah. But she is the ruler of her house, and she's not allowed to talk about North County, San Diego to her husband at all. But this woman is amazing to be able to see what she's doing and transforming lives, not only in her professional life, but in her personal life. And the art of storytelling has been done at no other level as high as what Kindra has been able to do. So I want to welcome to the show, Miss Kindra Hall. Mrs. Kindra
Kelly.
Hall. Sorry, I said Miss.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's okay. I'll take them both. It's so good. And I was gonna note, like, you sound different today. There's something about. I think you should go and sing a rock concert tonight, or like Smelly Cat. Remember? Did you ever watch Friends when Phoebe got the flu or whatever it was, and then she's like, Smelly Cat, smell. There you got. See, now I've ruined it. I am now taking over the Kelly podcast. It's just me, your host, Kindra Hall.
That's what it's about. That's what it's totally about. So tell me a little bit. We were talking before, and for everyone out there listening, what I want you to do, we're going to get the particulars out of the way. You need to check her out on Instagram, Kindra Hall. Am I correct? Kindra Hall on
That's
Instagram?
Right.
Okay, Kindra Hall on Instagram. You're going to pre-order her book. We made it very easy. I don't know my directions today. So if you look up, I believe in the left-hand side, there's a QR code. You could scan that. You could pre-order her book. I think you get like a gajillion dollars in value. She'll come and wash your car if you pre-order her book. Her and her husband and her kids will. And her dog that she's not that happy about having either.
No.
So
I know. I love somebody said to me, they're like, oh my gosh, I see you're a dog person. And I was like, I have a dog. I do feel it's important I love my dog, and I'm not a dog person, I don't think. Yeah.
We're both going to get in trouble because we're going down the dog rabbit hole here in a second.
I know.
Okay, my daughter was 7 years old. Up until she was 7 years old, every night, Daddy, can I get a dog? Daddy, can I get a dog?
Yeah.
Daddy, can I? And then I finally broke. And I was like, I'm going to get her a dog. I'm going to be that dad. And then I got it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's where we're at.
That's where we're at.
That's where we're at. And talk about being like broke. You finally broke. My husband, Michael, we were out walking the dog, and through a series of unfortunate events, the dog took off. And Michael didn't realize that the leash was like wrapped strangely around his finger, and it like was also propped up against his ring, and the dog broke his pinky. He had to go in for hand surgery, and all of this was right before running the New York City Marathon. I mean, so I will like try to pawn my dog off on other, because dogs come up in conversation all the time, and I'll be like, do you want a dog? And they'll all say, I don't have enough insurance to have your dog. It's terrible. And she's very wonderful. So, it's just one of those things.
So talk to me, Kindra, because you're a New Yorker now. We kind of touched on this a little bit. You've been there for 4 years. Some New Yorkers would be like, you've been here 4 years, you ain't a New Yorker, but you did go through some crazy. You chose to move to New York at probably the least inopportune time in the world.
It was, it was, Mm-hmm. We moved here in 2018, which in and of itself is like we lived in beautiful suburbia, Phoenix, on a golf course, and very close to California. We could go to the beaches, and just kind of on a whim, we decided this seems really easy. Let's just move to New York City, or, this is like what we see our life being forever. And we're already there. Like, let's make life a little bit harder. And, when you go to New York, you expect it to be hard. Like it's really hard. And then it got harder. Come March 2020, it got really, really hard. But I think that, like, had that not happened, I think you can look at, and that's one of the things I always say is like the middles of stories are always really messy. They're super intense. They don't make sense. You're questioning everything. Now, even though we're still kind of in the story isn't over, but in terms of us and our relationship with New York, being here during that time changed everything for us. It was suddenly not just like a place we were living for a bit for an adventure and then we would move back west. Now it's like, this is our home. These are our people. This is where we are. And I don't know that my heart will ever leave here even if like the rest of me does.
Kindra, help us too, because I mean, you're one of like, if anyone out there is either watching, if you're watching, you see her and you see her light up. If you're listening, you can hear the love, the joy in her voice, and when she's telling stories, she's not doing it from a mechanical sense. You've broke it down, which I love. But what I love about it is when you are off air, you live it. Like, and I wanted to see that this morning when we came on the call. We started talking, and you spoke in stories, but you spoke in stories that you actually believed. And there are so many people out there with so much information, and they put it in the steps, but they don't own the steps. Take us back to young Kindra and when these things, because when you tell a story, you're so engaging with it. When did you start to realize that was something that you had inside you?
Yeah, I think well, the first story I ever told was when I was 11. It was an assignment for 5th grade. We were supposed to go read a book to a 3rd grade classroom, which was fine. I decided that reading the book wasn't going to be nearly as fun for me as like telling the story that was in the book. So I get into the classroom and I put the book down and just start telling the story. And often because this is a story that I share, and often when I share it's all about the fact that in that moment, and it was at the end of the day, it was at the end of the school year, the 3rd graders were bouncing off the walls. Like it was the girl who went right before me, she read the book, I'll like you forever. I'll love you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby, you'll be. So now, this is like in the early 90s it would have been, and that book had just come. Now it makes me want to go off the shelf and pull that book and like look at the pub date for that book. Early 90s, and she sat down and was holding up the pictures and reading the book, and the kids were they were miserable. It wasn't her fault. It was just like it's not actually a book for kids. It's actually a book for very hormonal mothers, if you think about it. Like that's like people who have much more wisdom about the progression of like the meaning of life. And so here she is reading this book, and I had to go after her, and I was like, oh my gosh, like how am I ever going to, like I can't even do this. I'm falling asleep. And so I put the book down. I told the story. And when I share this story, I often focus on that audience of 3rd graders. And then it only took a few sentences for those 3rd graders to like be eating out of the palm of my hand. And I was like, well, this is interesting. Like if I really want people to listen to me, maybe I should be telling stories. Like this seems like, and at 11, I kind of picked up on that. But I think the other side of it, and to the uniqueness of the question you asked, I like my life more. I like my conversations more when I'm telling stories, when I'm hearing stories from other people. Like I think stories are so much more fun and of course memorable and everything else than just that, I don't know, answering questions. And if you allow it to happen, we were talking about your lost voice pre-show. And you said that and like, oh, I sound like a man. And just that comment brought me back to a story that happened to me years ago. And like, what an awesome thing it's these opportunities to transport each other into different areas of our life. And like, what better way to find meaning in your life than to allow yourself to go to all your different stories? So speaking in story just makes me happier too.
So, but help us too, because some of the people out there that are listening, they're like, well, I like to tell stories too, but you've always got that wah friend that tells stories. They'll catch some from you, and then they'll go into the negative side of it. Can you talk to us about how important your attitude about your story is because when I say this, listeners, people watching, Kendra's the real deal. Like, Kendra's the real deal. I checked it. I heat checked her before we went live. And what she's talking about, she lives it because I watched it and I watched her embody it. But number one, how important is the attitude part of it? And number two, how was that attitude constructed? Because a lot of times, you know, as young kids, depending on our circumstances, we have the tendency to see it from a different lens.
Yeah, I don't know, Kelly. I've always, and maybe it is the storytelling aspect of it. When you see yourself as a living, breathing story, you know, like that, like even the hardships, even, you know, March 2020, New York City, my primary source of income, the way I literally pay our rent, okay, comes from speaking for large gatherings of humans. So think about this. I mean, and I always say I had a 2-week advance. I was kind of like, I had a 2-week head start on what was coming our way because events started calling 2 weeks like in late February, saying out of an abundance of caution, out of an abundance of caution. So I had these 2 very dark weeks where no one else in my life seemed to be affected by this thing that seemed very far away. And I felt so alone and it was so dark, and just watching income and an entire business that I had spent years building just evaporate. And I'm not going to say it was necessarily a pretty thing. There were really dark moments, but I guess I think that's the greatest thing that's ever come from my experience in story and my study of story and my immersion in storytelling is that it's all a story. So if you can just get through this part, this is a part you will talk about later. You know, like this is a part that you'll be like, we're laughing right now about the entire collapse of my financial, like we put Post-its up on the wall of how much money we could spend. And like if you went to the grocery store, Michael was our grocery store goer, and you spent $20, they were in $10 increments, and you spent $10, you spent $15, you had to take 2 of the Post-its off the wall and put one up that said $5. Actually, we got to the point where I was like, hey, just cross off the 10 and put the 5 because we can't afford to get more Post-its. Like you, right? And we're like laughing about it now. But so that is, and not that you'll ever, I mean, it's naive to think that the day will ever come where you'll be able to laugh about everything. But there is something about the faith that you have in that, okay, this is really difficult, but I know that this is a middle, and I don't know how long it's going to go, and I don't know how bad it's going to get, but at some point I will look back and tell the story of this middle and why it makes sense as to where I am now. And so I think that you know, like the Debbie Downer, the people who are always really negative, is they just, I don't know. I go through life like, oh, let's see how this story's gonna turn out, you know, like that. That's I guess it's a learned approach and a conscious approach. In some ways, it's a privileged approach. Like I can be in that place, but I think it's a valuable one.
Well, for all of you listening and for you, Kendra, when the pandemic happened, every single business that we have, like they say, diversify. Every single business that we have, every one of them, 100% gone. Like, and I was diversified. We own salons across the country; those were gone.
Oh yeah,
I speak, that was gone. I mean, every aspect of that. So when I'm laughing with you and not at you. But I want to tell you this too. I had the worst situation ever because I had the meeting with all of our salons We had them throughout the country. And I sit down with them, I believe it's 4 days before the 16th, March 16th, which is
Yeah.
the day. And I have a meeting with my leadership, and I said, look, guys, chill out. I've been through 9/11. I've been through the crash in 2008. Everything's going to be cool. 10 days, 14 days, tops, we're back up and rolling. Everyone's good. The worst part about this, Kindra, is I recorded that meeting.
Oh, that doesn't age well. Yeah, that's gonna go bad. That is. But at the same time, you're like, that's where we all, and isn't there just this like, look at, like, we really, I mean, I wish I had recorded more more. I just wish I had recorded more of the things that but that's an important thing from a storytelling perspective as well. Like, we should we should record as much as we can, because there's always this nostalgia. My kids, Kelly, my kids call like March 2020, April 2020, the good old days. Can we just I mean, like that, to hear them say. So we've moved apartments since, and we'll walk by our old apartment where we were just always there. We did leave. We weren't the people that never left. We would go to Central Park. So Central Park was a couple blocks away. I mean, what an incredible experience to be in Central Park and be the only people there. It was, you can't even, I can hardly imagine it now. See, because that's what happens as time goes on, and we kind of, we erase the nuances of it, and how important it is that we record as much as possible, because in that recording, we can see how far we've come. Like, what, again, that's what life really is.
Well, Kendra, talk to me too about, because this is just a generalization. So I get in trouble for generalizations, but I'm okay with getting.
I'm very mean. I'm gonna get you in big. You can tell I am. This is big trouble.
Most of the time when I find someone sit into their purpose, and this is truly your purpose, like you could see it, you could hear it. When you speak about it, it just exudes from you. Your purpose is to help people to understand their stories and to be able to construct them, you know? But what I find is when someone sits in their purpose, a lot of times it's healing for them. Talk to us about young Kindra, because you hit on it a few times, but you yada-yada'd me a little bit with, you did. We made a Seinfeld, or you made a Friends reference earlier. I'm going to make a Seinfeld reference right now. Okay. But you were talking about your resilience, the ability to bounce back. Let's go back. Who taught you that? Was it your mom? Was it mom and dad that were teaching you that you need to look at the bright side of this? Or was it, because say for instance with me, people used to say that I had rose-colored glasses all the time. And I figured out why I had rose-colored glasses, because my older brother, when my parents would fight, my brother would throw me in the room and tell me to play with my toys. I would play. He would go out and get in the middle of my parents, and he would sometimes take an ass beating. And I would be playing, and I would be like, oh, everything's cool. And that's the way I grew up. My brother became a lawyer, one of the top attorneys in Vegas, right? And he wants to always scratch the surface. For me, I'm just hanging out. Like, and I realize that part. Help us to understand that young Kindra and where this amazing attitude or way to be able to shift things came from.
I think that it's and what I'm experiencing right now is something that a lot of people experience, is I just don't really have a story to tell. Like, it seems very vanilla. It seems very without, like, there isn't a good story there. However, now sitting here and being asked this question so explicitly makes me realize that, again, like, my story is my story. So I grew up in a household with 2 social worker parents. So communication and understanding our choices and ownership of our actions, and like, we did a lot of talking things out, and like, it was a very and not in a, for me personally, not in a weird, like I'm all messed up because my parents kept making me talk things out, right? Like I am better for it in that way. I think that when it comes to looking at the bright side, is that my parents taught me that there are always a lot of perspectives. Like there's more to the story to understand. My parents both worked. I mean, as I became a teenager, like we there was some like friction. There was some expectations of perfection that like I fully stepped into. And, I remember once I got in trouble because I left my purple folder at school in my locker for whatever. I was like a junior in high school. I'm like, I'm just going to get in the car and go back to the school and get my purple folder. And my dad was like, how'd you forget this purple folder? Why did you, like you can't just get, and really what he's thinking is we live in rural Minnesota. Where it's dirt roads all the way. It's the middle of winter. It is not safe, and it's 8 p.m. It's pitch black. Well, it's pitch black at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Like it is not safe for you to go back to school for this purple folder. I didn't know that. I took it as my dad saying, "Why aren't you perfect? How dare you forget a folder?" And I was like, I come back and I'm like, do you have any idea what I have going on in my life right now? I am on student council. I'm on Students Against Drunk Driving. I listed off, like I am like, you've been wanting me to be perfect. And here I am being perfect. And I got to go back and get that purple folder because I want to get my homework done so I can be perfect at school tomorrow too. Right. So there was like some of that. But I think that I grew up in an environment where there was definitely an attitude of seek to understand, and where people were given an opportunity to tell their side of the story. And you were expected to do it respectfully. And if you didn't, and both sides. And if you didn't, you were expected to apologize and come back and do it respectfully. So I grew up for my personal experience, it was extremely functional, right? Like and so in which case I'm like, well, I really don't like it was about as but then I get to say, okay, so this is important then to bring forward. But I think additionally, I know, do you have is that like a common response? Like
No,
I just
no.
came from a really functional.
No, I mean, but Kindra, do you realize that you're the weird one then?
I am.
You realize
yes.
But also too, what I love about it is as you were talking through it, you were like, no, we live very vanilla. No, your ass didn't. You lived in the backwoods in Minnesota. and your dad was, like, you ain't driving this. And so it's great to be able to hear it, right? It's great to be able to hear that part. Now help me though, because when you perform and you have to communicate, right? When you get 13, 14, 15 years old, even though it's the right thing to do, I mean, we all, we don't do it. Did you choose some bad boys early on?
Yes.
Yes, you did.
but then, like I think about it, like were they really that bad? I think that I've actually been thinking about this recently. Mm-hmm. In that it's a plight to when you're in young dating age to be able to see the good in people and like want to like root for that. I don't even know why I was thinking about it. I was thinking about like old relationships because I met Michael when I actually met him on my 25th birthday. Wow. And I knew right when I met him, I was like, oh, there you are. I have been looking and I'm so glad that I found you because here you are. And there's I was very certain that I would marry him. And he just took a lot longer to figure that out. And it got irritating, if I'm honest. But I like went through a whole bunch of people before 25 that like and like I'm sure my father was just out of his mind. My mother too. Like I had, because I was just like, and I would always fall all the way in love. Like that was my thing. And sometimes I would fall in love with the idea of the best in them, and they just weren't ready for the best in them yet, you know?
So you had actually constructed and were living your book before you wrote it, because you were telling yourself these stories that these guys, I mean, where do you think the fixer part came from?
I think we already answered that question. I grew up with 2 social worker parents, right?
Yes.
So that, but I think we all think about this story that could be, and where it becomes dangerous is when you then sacrifice your own self-respect or your safety, in an effort to create a story that maybe isn't fully there, right? Like that it's more fictional than reality, right? And that's actually one of the things that's really important to me, is when I'm teaching and talking about stories, this isn't fiction. We have all the stories we need in the life we've already lived, for better, for worse, whether that's outward business stories that you're using for sales and marketing. They're already all that. You don't have to make up a story. They're all there in your business. I mean, your salons, like think about every single person that walks in that door is like 20 stories, and God bless the woman, man working on the hair. Like that's a lot of stories to take on. And if you've got several clients throughout a day, like you're just basically a story factory, or at least taking them in and processing them. Like we don't have to look outside our own lives to have all of the material. And even when you're looking for meaning or purpose or joy in your own life, there are stories already there for you too. Like even just sitting here with you right now, I had forgotten about the purple folder, and here it is. And all this, I'm thinking about these other, things that have happened in my childhood that really are, if they didn't shape who I am, they are at least accurate representations of who I am and how I came to be here.
Kindra, take me back to, we're going to stay in the young Kindra there for a second. Then we'll move on. But tell me one time where what you thought was absolutely normal, because you said vanilla and you didn't live in a vanilla. Like,
I know.
Right? You said that, and that was the story you believed. But talk to me about a situation where you thought it was normal when you were a kid, and then you and Michael are hanging out, maybe having a little glass of wine, whatever. I'm not, and you think about it and you're like, that was not normal. Can I give you an example?
Yes, please.
Okay. So my dad used to hang out with his buddies in the basement. And in the basement, he used to talk in a different voice. Well, they used to sit around this thing that was probably about 4 foot tall, and it had hoses off of it. And when I would go down in the basement, there would be this weird smell. He would always be next to this hose, and he would talk in a weird voice. He would always turn to me after he had the hose close to his mouth, and then he'd take it off, and he'd be like, "Hey, Kelly, can you go up and get me some?" And then he would always take a large exhale afterwards. I thought this was the basement voice. I had no idea. So this is, up until probably 2nd grade. And then I'm in 8th grade. I'm walking to school with my buddy, and I smell something. And I'm like, wow, hey, Will, that smells like my basement. When I was growing up. And he's like, oh, your dad's a pothead. And I had no idea. Talk to us about something that you thought was normal in rural vanilla, not vanilla. You had some sprinkles on there that now you look back and you're like, that ain't normal.
I mean, it's not going to be a basement voice, though I have had those like recalls. And back, where I grew up, it was 30 minutes to, like, it was a long distance for me to call my friends at school, like that I went to school with. Like we lived in different area codes.
Did you have the lipstick phone?
It was just the Yes, I did.
Did you have the
Was
lipstick
it
phone, or did you have the one that
I
flipped over like the Swatch one? Or
I don't think it was the lipstick phone, but it was red. I did have a red phone, but I wasn't cool enough. Like, that was so DJ Tanner had that. I was never as cool as DJ Tanner and the lipstick phone. No, I had like a boring red. It was like maroonish phone. But that was we yeah, so it was but I do remember in our like we lived on 10 acres. So when you talk about chores, like my husband had a paper route or whatever. My chore was we lived on 10 acres and a lot of it was wooded. So we had to be careful in the fall to wear bright clothing when we went out to play in the woods that were like behind the field in the woods behind our house. There was this creek because of people out hunting deer. My parents didn't want us to get shot in rural Minnesota. So that now that I say that out loud, that may be different. Um, then, it's a whole different yeah, that was a different environment back then, but still we were concerned and they were worried about me moving to New York City and the safety. Now this is all coming. I'm like, hold on. Hold on
I
a
could have got
second.
shot in my backyard.
Pretty sure. Yes, exactly. Like, okay, so see, I'm learning some things. This is good therapy session. But so we lived on 10 acres and my dad decided he worked all the time. He worked very hard at his job and then he would come home and work very hard and he just kept he wanted every inch of our 10 acres except for the woods where we could get shot to be grass. Like he wanted it all. And so we decided there was this big like swap. Our house was kind of built into a hill. And there was this big hill that we could go sledding down, and then it went up another hill. And he decided that what he wanted to do was turn it into a driving range. So he first like tore down all the weeds and he would do this in sections. So the driving range just got bigger and bigger until it was like 185 yards. And we put a pin with a flag at it was a par 3. And so he would like, you have to first take out all the tall grass and then you have to like burn it. I don't know if that was legal or not. So just don't let's not talk about that. But you had to like burn the grass and then you had to till it up. And then if you wanted to plant new grass, you had to pick out all the rocks out of the dirt. But that was pretty hard manual labor. And so that was my job to pick rocks. So while some kids get an allowance, we never got an allowance. I tried to convince them for making the bed or brushing my teeth, but I did get 25 cents for every 10-gallon bucket of rocks that I picked up out of the yard. No,
I love
I
your
think
dad.
I think even with inflation, that's not very good. I don't think that is minimum. I think that is just straight up child labor. So, but I would spend, and you know what? I remember there was a Barbie doll and I don't remember exactly which one. But there was a Barbie doll that I really wanted and I picked so many rocks. And my brother and sister would get tired after like one bucket and I'd be out there. I had this whole system where I would go and I would like pick them all up and put them in like pot because it's this huge expansive space. So I would just like collect the rocks and make little smaller piles and then I would go around and pick up the bigger piles and then we planted then all the grass got planted and then guess what happens? Somebody's got to mow it. So then that became my job too. So I would spend 5 hours on at least it was a riding lawnmower, mowing the lawn. And we had this like John Deere that someone had like handed down and it would pop out of gear. And so I'd be going up the hill and it would pop out of gear and I'd go hurtling backwards and I'm like trying to put it back into gear. And the whole time I was like, I had on my Walkman, like tape player, like, what's that? Casey and JoJo, I think was on that,
Yes.
like all of that.
You
And I would
listened to
practice
Jodeci in Minnesota?
we listened to who knows, or like, waterfalls. Don't go chasing
Yes,
waterfalls. I would
TLC.
practice my acceptance speeches, like being on the news, all on the lawnmower. And now even to this day, whenever we walk by like a big open lawn in Central Park, my kids are even like, if it's been freshly mowed, my kids will be like, look at the lines on that one, mama. And because I really, that's my dream, is to go mow the lawns in Central Park. But I guess like hard work was definite, like hard labor was definitely valued in my family.
So take me through the conversation when you sit down with your dad and tell him, like, okay, so this is his hard-nosed social working. Then he comes home and he's plowing the fields, picking up the rocks, doing the whole thing. And then you come to him and you're like, yo, I'm going to tell stories for a living. Like,
Yeah,
come
that
on, talk to me now.
I didn't. I mean, so here's the one thing was that as I was getting ready to tell that first story for that 5th grade assignment, I did come home and say to my mom, I think I want to just tell this story. I think I just want to tell it. And so I practiced for her. And she tells the story that she was sitting on the floor. I was standing up. Her back was against the couch. And she saw me start telling the story and was like, what have I just seen? So when you ask like, where does this come from? I really think, without getting too, I mean, I'm a spiritual person. I feel like this is my, I am the vessel. Like I am just a portal of light for this. And so that's why it's like hard for me to explain it. It was just, I think it's always been there for me.
Mhm.
And I was just really fortunate enough to have parents and then people along my path who like my mom saw it right then when I practiced for her. And then when I told that first story in 5th grade, one of the teachers was like, what just happened here? And then I didn't go back to 5th grade. So now like when my kids need help with math, I'm like, yeah, I'm out. Like I haven't done math since 4th grade, and our 4th grade math was a lot lower grade than what your grade math is doing. So I'm out. I stopped because I just went to every classroom in my school telling that story. And then these other opportunities, like there would be storytelling competitions, or I was on the speech team and told stories there. I entered a national storytelling competition and ended up winning that. Like, so in some ways, my dad was like, well, we always knew that we knew this was going to be a part of what you were doing, but I thought you were going to be a journalist. Like, I thought you were going to be writing for a paper. I thought you were going, like, because it was very, a Gonzo, Gonzo on the Muppets. Like, you know who he is, but you don't really know what
I've never heard
he
that.
is.
I've never heard that association, and I love you.
Like that's what I like. You know who he is, but you don't know what he is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so and I feel like I actually, now that you say it, I feel like there are a lot of Gonzos, and like Gonzo, and you love Gonzo, and you're like, oh my gosh, you're so Gonzo, but like, what are you? And I think the world is always trying to figure out, like, yeah, I get that but what are you? And so there was definitely a little bit of that. And with this achievement, hardworking. And so only now, and it's hard to explain. Oh, my daughter talks about storytelling to like, how do you, she moved to New York City. She has an apartment, like but she talks about, like it was a little ambiguous. And that's hard. I think that's hard for anyone when there's someone you respect, whether it's a parent or whoever it is, as you're still trying to figure out, the who, but you're trying to figure out the what. It makes you then a little bit more self-conscious about the who of your gonzo-ness. It wasn't like always easy, but I think throughout the course of my growing up, it was always a really clear, like I was allowed to be who I was and encouraged to be who I was. And even if that was so it was interesting to see that, like, then kind of flip when it's like, hey, what are you doing? Because I quit a job to be a storyteller. And we had no idea I was writing for a while. I wrote wedding vows, wedding stories for people. So what I would do, so I left my job and I was going to be a storyteller, which I still wasn't sure what that was going to look like. And I would interview couples, like a bride and a groom, and I would interview them separately and get their story of like when they met, when they proposed, and like what they loved about each other. And I would write it uh, for them, and then they would either read it to each other at the wedding, or they would have someone out, like a best man and a maid of honor, read it for them. I was making about the same per hour doing that as I was picking up rocks. Okay, so it wasn't a financially I probably would have made more picking up rocks. Like I charged like $100 for like 500 hours of
I love
work,
it.
but you know, it was just I don't think I would have gotten through that, because I also wanted to be successful and I wanted to earn an income and I wanted to, I don't think I would have gone all the way if I hadn't always known, like, okay, we're just honing the what. Like the who's already there. We're just honing the what.
Talk to us a little bit about when you said, because I think a lot of times when you don't fit into a box, and this is what I love
Mhm.
about you. Like we haven't got a chance to spend that much time together, but the time that we've got to spend together, and even in the 10 minutes before we went on air, guys, I actually started recording. Everyone out there listening, I started
Oh
recording
no.
before Kindra knew. So I'm gonna release some of the sound bites from this, and what you'll see is that every aspect of your book you've
Mm,
already talked about, but you've embodied
mhm.
it. We haven't even talked about your book. Like
I know.
which is amazing. If you want to get up in I think it's the left or the right, whatever, where the QR code is, scan it. It'll change your life. The people that are doing endorsements for it, I
Mm.
love to watch people's endorsements for books because most of the time people are like, hello, I read the book. You're like, no, you didn't. You didn't. But Kendra's are like in the camera, grabbing the camera, like, I read it, changed my life. You're the best.
Mm.
But what I love about this is that you literally, like every single aspect. I mean, you came up with a four-way part of storytelling, right? Which normally
Mhm.
all of us normal people, we have an event, we have a response, we have a result. What what Kendra said is you have the event, you have the story, you have the response, you have the result. If you go back, I've never asked anyone to rewind a podcast. Rewind this and start at the beginning and write those words down: event, story, response, result. And you'll see that every time that Kendra told a story, she was embodying that every single time. Even the time where she got tripped up and said that she was vanilla and her life was, no, she wasn't. She was picking up rocks. That should be your next book.
Picking up rocks, I
But
know, and sawing down trees. I mean,
so,
I just would, yeah, I mean, it was
well, tell us too about, because you don't fit a mold, right? You don't fit a
mhm.
mold. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna go to school and then I'm gonna be a CEO of a company, whatever it is. I mean, literally, like you are a storyteller. That's who you are. That's what you do. But you do it at the highest level. Talk to us about some of the challenges, though, those dark times, because there's a lot of people out there that don't fit a mold. My dad said this
Mhm.
to me the other day. He's like, it's real easy to talk about my two older sons, but it's sometimes hard to talk about you, son. And I said, why? He said, because your older brother's a doctor, your other brother's a lawyer. And he's like, I don't know what the hell you do.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
so we had salons before, we shifted into that. But there's been all these things. But talk to those people out there that are the gonzos that,
Mhm.
what were some of the things that you went through and the feelings and emotions that you went through during that time to be able to figure out and sit into the fact of, I love the fact that you're just you.
I think that, I mean, I can go you can see it expressed in so many different ways, like, all the way back to high school, where I was just loud and, my eyebrows moved too much when I was, like, trying to express myself, and, when you're trying to be cool, but I was just so, and then there would be those cool kids who saw some, like, who like you were like I have this memory of this really cool boy who was like it was our freshman year of high school, and he's always been he was born cool. I think he was cool like starting in for as long forever. Like I'm sure he's still cool. He's so cool. He's not on social media, so I have no idea how cool he is. That's how cool he is, right? Like there's just no trace of him. And I remember one day after school, it was our freshman year of high school, like that first couple weeks, and I was after school for speech team and he was after school for whatever cool sport you play in the fall. I think it was football. And we were at the soda machine, and he got a Welch's grape soda and like gave it to me to have a taste. And it was like done. Like suddenly I was accepted. Like it wasn't cool, but I was me. And and so you see these little glimmers of like, oh, okay, it's okay to be me. But more often than not, when you're a gonzo, you're getting different messages, whether it's from the outside or even just the messages that you're saying in your own head. And so I remember being someone who wanted to achieve and wasn't afraid to work hard. It seemed like what I should do was really a corporate role. I wanted to wear high heels. I wanted to run an office. I wanted to, but it just kept coming back, this thing that I was meant to do. And so I remember when I first left the job, and I had decided that how I was going to be a storyteller after the wedding writing, after like blogging. I just was trying all these. It was very strange. And then
Kendra,
I said,
how long did it take you to write the vows? Like seriously, you said 500 hours, but I know, but you were saying you were getting paid the same as picking up
no,
rocks.
it
So how many
was,
hours would you spend on these vows?
I would say like 100 hours
Oh my
probably.
gosh.
Because you want to get it. And when you're someone who loves stories as much as I do, and when you talk to people, like right now, right, where you're interviewing me, but like I love hearing people's stories, and like you hear and then to take their stories. And I think one of the coolest things is when someone tells you their story and they don't realize how amazing it is. And then my job was to take it. I know. My job was to take it and like reshape it to make it even more. And I would just spend forever on that. Too
Did you
much
record them?
time.
Did you record them or have them send you the video? So and
No,
how were
I never even saw it.
yeah, and because I'm sure that you were, possibly marketing this to to other people who didn't want.
Which was not even that marketing. It was good that I wasn't very good at
Oh my
marketing, because
gosh,
otherwise I would have had to do more of them,
that's
right?
amazing.
So it was messy. But then I remember I decided what I really wanted to do was teach people how to tell stories for themselves, so I didn't have to tell their stories. Like I was like, wait. If you feed a man a fish, right? Or if you teach a man a story. So I'm just going to teach him the story. And this is at this point, I had gotten further along. Like I was doing some work with nonprofits and seeing the results in donations just by changing it to stories versus we raise X number of dollars for this fund every year and every dollar counts, blah, blah. Like who cares about that? But do you know, this is a little side, once I was in charge of a silent auction, and it was for a small event. It was and it was called a men's event. So it was just there was like 75 men, and then the wives were there too, and it was in this steakhouse, and it was beautiful, but there were silent auction items. And I was like, silent auction is so boring, like how are we going to? And so I sat down with every single one of the items that was donated, and I wrote a story about every single one. And some of them, in some cases, they were made up. One like somebody donated a mattress. They were a mattress company, so they donated like this really beautiful mattress. And I was like, for when you're in the doghouse, at least you can sleep more comfortably. And then I wrote this whole story about, the in-laws coming to town and you didn't know or whatever it was. And it was the most successful fundraiser, not a silent auction that the organization had ever had, because people were just hanging over the silent auction table reading all of the stories. And so at that point I started to, I think, see a little bit more value in what I brought to the marketplace. It wasn't just that stories are entertaining. It wasn't just that they can be for weddings. Like, there was a real, like, you could do really good things in the world if you were better at telling stories. And so I decided to like create this course it was on, just for the record, workbooks and DVDs. So no longer available. um, and I had
Can
like
you
a
send
friend.
me, you know you have one of the DVD sets. Can you
I only have
send
one.
me?
I can't because I only saved one because I
Can you
moved
burn
so
it?
much.
Can you burn it?
No,
Who
you
has
can't burn.
who has
Who
a
has who has
DVD
a
burner?
DVD burner? My old college just sent
Hey,
me
someone
the
out there.
the
Someone out there that's listening.
no.
Someone out
And
there has a
honestly,
DVD burner. I need these DVDs.
no, it is probably in a storage unit somewhere across the country. Like, we moved so many times that I was finally like, I'm not bringing these with me. These can stay here.
And you
When
got
I die, when Michael and I die, our kids are going to have to travel all over the country to find our different storage units where we're keeping all our junk. And like, that is just, I haven't told them about that yet. Hopefully we're not going to go anywhere anytime soon.
I need
But
you to will me a DVD. But what
you
I
get
am going to
you
say
get
is I think it would be cool. This is why I'm not going to be your marketing manager, is because I think it would be cool if you hit the QR code and you go and pre-order the book. Kindra is going to pick one person to send those DVDs to, only for a week, and you have to send them back. She's going to send you the return postage, and she'll send them out to you, and you get to just enjoy them. You won't have a DVD player because I don't think anyone in the world does except my Uncle Lou.
You just hold it. Yeah. Yes, Uncle Lou.
My Uncle Lou has, I believe, still has a DVD player.
Someone just sent me a CD, and I was like, but did you also send me a CD player? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm so sorry.
I took you off course, but take me back to the course. You did the course.
I'll take you back. I'll take you back to the course. Okay, I'll take you back to the course because I had like one of my like high achieving friends, like they, and we were always with like, I've always, you surround yourself with people who are like, and so one of my friends who I respect and I love and is really successful in their own right, was over, whatever, and saw my DVDs and my workbooks out on the kitchen table that I had spent years creating at this point. Cause I had also had 2 kids at that time. Like that was that phase of life. And they were like, what's this? And I'm like, this is my storytelling course. And they were like, your what? Like, my course about storytelling. And they were like, well, what does this course do? And I said, well, you watch it and you do the workbook and you're a better storyteller. And they were like, but who's going to buy that? and I just stood there and I was like, I hope someone will buy it. And then do you know what happened, Kelly? I did the whole like digital marketing launch. Like, I sent out. Do you know who bought it? Nobody bought it.
Did you do the waterfall campaign too? Did you do the waterfall campaign?
Yeah, where it was like, I don't know what the waterfall, I don't know. It wasn't the waterfall campaign. Okay. It was like piece of content, like 3 videos, and then sales video, and then
email the next day. And it's like, you missed your time, but here it is. And then give you a couple stories in time.
Yeah, but no, didn't. And this was me as a storyteller. So imagine like, and I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure my dad called me to see how the launch went. And I don't know how I spun that story, but it was terrible. And I remember.
Did you sell any?
No, not in that first like week. I think someone bought one like 2 weeks later or something. Like it was, but it was a big, for the launch period, it was a big 0. It was 0. And each day, so like you send it out and I'm like, and I was following all of the people who were like, digital, right? And they were like, you're going to make a gazillion dollars. And so I just sat there and like waited to make a gazillion dollars. And I made $0. And I remember, so like it was the first day and Michael was like, no, we're going to send out the reminder email. And then we send out the other, because he's invested in this too, right? Because he's now the sole breadwinner. This is my job, is selling this program that no one is buying. And God bless the man for believing in me the way he does, right? And he was like, Kindra, maybe. And I said to him after several days of 0 sales, I was like, hold on a second. This was a failure. And I need a minute to sit here and not look on the bright side, maybe it's because I'm like, he's just not that into you, right? Like he didn't call you back. They didn't buy it's not like, oh, maybe all the pay phones, or maybe he didn't have a quarter. Maybe, like back to high school when you had to call people on pay phones. But I was like, just let me be here in this space of failure, and then I can move forward. But I have to be all the way here. And I remember calling my best friend, who I love, and she was like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, I think this is the worst day of my professional career. How are you? She's like, you sound pretty good for it being the worst day of your professional career, right? Because I needed a minute to be super bummed. But then like, all right, where do I go from here? Like and what had happened was, over the course of developing that course, I had learned how to teach people how to do storytelling. And then all I had to do was take, it was a two DVD, actually 4 altogether. It was a lot of DVDs. Okay. There was like the Friends collection. They came in different colors. Could buy.
Did it come 4 of them sitting out like this in a square, or was it like stacked on top of each other?
No, it was 2 and then 2.
Yes.
So it was like 2. It was 2 in one workbook and then 2 in another workbook. And but in that meantime, I had learned how to teach storytelling, and then that became my keynote, and then that became my book. And then I realized that my whole life, what I've been doing is seeing my life as story, and that I knew, even sitting in that moment, the biggest business failure that I had felt thus far, that would be a story and here we are, that I would tell someday, right? And be like, wow, it's going to be really awesome when I tell the story of how this tanked, because I won't even believe it. I want to be at the point where I won't even believe that I ever failed. And I'm going to be so grateful that this happened to me. Which ultimately now is this book, is you get to choose what stories you tell yourself and what they mean for your life right now, and where you are, but more importantly, where you want to go.
I think it's incredible. So talk to me so you go through this part, then you get into the keynote part. Give me the pinch me moment where obviously you speak in front of crowds all over. You speak in front of huge crowds. You're all over the place. The press is like clamoring for you. I was so excited to be able to get you on the show.
Oh,
but tell me, Kindra, the pinch me moment where you're standing backstage. And tell us how many in the audience, whatever it was, and you're like, holy poop, those DVDs got me to be in this spot, and I am so excited to be here.
I think that, you have a lot of those pinch me moments. There was one prior to this, like it was the first time that I spoke at an event, and it wasn't like I didn't have a PowerPoint. It was really rough. Like somebody just out of the blue was like, hey, can you come speak about storytelling? And I was like, yes, I can. And I remember after that, and it was a mess, like I wish I had it on video. Nobody filmed it. But it was a mess, I know. But again, I was And actually, I made a friend that day and a fellow speaker there. And something that he said to me was, I've never seen someone be more themselves on stage. And I think I knew right then, because I had spent some time trying to be other people. You do that when you're a gonzo. You want to be other people because it seems, you're like, well, I don't quite get myself, but I see that works over there. So I remember watching a lot of guy keynote speakers and being like, look at how they just like move effortlessly across the stage. And I'm like, oh, right, because they're wearing loafers. And I prefer wearing heels.
Loafers?
Yeah, they were all loafer wearers.
Okay,
you may wear sneakers, but the guys I was watching were wearing loafers.
Okay.
I love a loafer. I just got some loafers. But I'm going to wear heels.
You can make some loafers look good, but does Michael wear loafers? He ain't wearing no
sneakers.
Michael is cool because he's got a beautiful, amazing wife. He's got to be cool. He's got to keep it up. He ain't showing up in any loafers.
No, he wasn't in. I'm not saying like these were. I was watching people, so that should have been my first red flag. But instead,
so take us back. You're going through. They're running around in their loafers
and I'm like, oh gosh, how do I be that? No, and I was like, wow, okay, I don't want to wear loafers. So, but I remember after that keynote, even though it was a mess, I remember standing, and it was in Vegas, but not on the Strip. It was like some event like off the Strip and way far off the Strip. And I remember like looking out my window at just like a dirt parking lot because it wasn't on the Strip. And I was thinking, I think I could do this. I think I could what if I could provide for my family doing this? And it was, I mean, I remember because the windows were like where you could just see your own reflection kind of it with all the weird treatment they put on the windows. You're just kind of looking at yourself out the window. But then I did have, and you know what, actually, Kelly, I think now when you ask that, like what was a pinch me moment? I think that's one of the things that makes me great on stage is because before every event, I tap back into like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Not in a doubtful way, not in a, can I do this or am I supposed to be here? But like, pinch me. I can't believe that this is what I get to do. And even when everything went virtual and we had to lock our kids because they were doing virtual school at the beginning of it all, right? And everything had gone virtual. We're filming in the living room. We would lock our kids in our closet with an iPad. There's a bathroom attached to the closet so they could go to the bathroom. Sure. We would give them snacks. We would give them water. And my mom would read to them over FaceTime from wherever. I think they would have been in Arizona at the time. And so she would read to them for hours while we filmed out in the living room. And we'd like at one point hear the door open. We're like, what are you doing? Get back in the closet. It was very aggressive. Those were tense times. The good old days, as my kids refer to it, remember? But I think it's so important for me to like tap back into every single time. Like, wow, I can't believe that this is what I get to do. And that's been kind of a constant throughout.
When tell us about a specific time when your husband called you on your poop? Because I think a lot of times, like, say I'll be working on a keynote, or I'll be going to a place to speak to an audience or whatever it is. And and I know, like when the stage hits, you can kind of black out. You know what I'm saying? Like you can black out and you could go into that place. I see that you have it. Like, I mean, you're honestly like one of the best that I've seen. And so, but my wife, when I come home and I try those techniques on my wife, she ain't having that. She ain't having that. She's like, so talk to us about when Michael is like, put down the storytelling. This is not going to be about the event, the story, the response and the result. This is going to be about me and you sitting right here, and we need to deal with this.
He's only like, he's fully indoctrinated, I think he knows that this is but I do know there was, and this was early on. This was early on in our marriage, and of course my work, where he was still working full time at a company, struggling with something interpersonally at work, and he just kept coming home and talking about the same thing over and over and over again. And he would say the same thing, and then I would say the same thing, and then he would say, and I was just so done with it. And then it came like one day he came home and he was talking about the thing, and it came to the pause where I'm supposed to talk about the thing too. And instead, I told a story of a mutual friend of ours who was having some office politics stuff going on, and like, you know, what was happening there and how they worked through it or weren't working through it. And I finished and was like, so, you know, like, it was the same advice, the same response I'd been giving for the past however long he'd been talking about it, but it was just in story form. And I remember very intentionally being like, I should tell a story here. And he was like, and I said, so does that make sense? And he said, yeah. And don't think I don't know what you just did there. And so he knows, but it's also, you know, the great thing is, I think the great thing about our relationship, and the great thing that can happen in relationships, is when you catch each other in your limiting story. So like, he has these beliefs about himself, and like and stories about why he can't do certain things, whether they're stories from his own life or stories from things that he sees around him. So he thinks, well, maybe they can do it, but I can't, or that just can't be done, or whatever it is. And for me to be like, my job as a partner and spouse and someone who sees him for who he is to remind him of the stories that quiet all those other ones, of when he did this and nobody else could figure that out, and when he made this happen, and how he's doing this right now. And he does the same for me. And I think we forget ourselves sometimes. And it's so, whether it's a spouse or a dear friend or a sibling or another family member, to have someone here that be like, oh, I see what story you're telling yourself right now, but you should tell yourself these stories instead. And like, to equip them with that. I think that those are the most important relationships there are.
Well, I think it's incredible, and I'm going to run it down here in a second. But I do the whole reason why I started the podcast, Kindra, is because of my kids. Mckenna, who's just about to be 13 years old,
Wow.
on Sunday. Absolutely beautiful. I mean, amazing heart. She's the artist in the family. And then there's Maddox, and Maddox is 10 years old. He's a cartoon character. He we were yelling like, come on down, like, it's time for school, it's time for school. He walks down, and he gets down the stairs, and he's like 15 minutes late. And Maddox is like,
Wow.
right on time. What? But to him, whenever he shows up, it's right on time. That's his
Yes,
personality.
that is where Maddox is, where he's supposed to be when he's supposed to be there. If he's there, that's when he's supposed to be. That's amazing.
On Thanksgiving, I think it was 2 years ago, we were in Highland, Indiana, visiting our friend and partner out there, and he wakes up in the hotel and he jumps out of bed. And he's like, "I did it!" And I was like, "That was the first words he said." And I said, "What'd you do, son?" He's like, "I woke up." So that's who Maddox. That's who Maddox is. So you got Maddox and Mckenna, 10 and 12, and I started the podcast because I wanted to take iconic people like yourself, and I wanted to show them that Kindra is not a superhero, that she is a human being who didn't walk down the yellow brick road. She walked down a place where she had to pick up a bunch of rocks into a bucket and get 25 cents for them. But she has a phenomenal attitude, crazy work ethic, and with that, you can accomplish anything. So what advice would you give to Maddox and Mckenna? And if you could use both of their names, it would be amazing.
I would say Maddox and Mckenna to remember these stories that are happening to you right now. Like, ask your parents for your stories. Like that story of Maddox coming down the stairs and being 15 minutes late and saying, I am right on time. Like, that is a story that Maddox needs to remember, because there are going to be days in the future, hopefully years in the future, but there will be days when Maddox, you think maybe you're too late, or you're not moving fast enough, or you've gotten somewhere too early, and you'll be questioning yourself, you'll be doubting yourself. That's part of what being a human who cares is. And I want you to reach back to 10-year-old self, your 10-year-old self, and say, no, wherever I am right on time. Like, there are things that are happening right now in your life that are stories and snapshots of who you really are. And if you ever forget that, or you feel confused, or you're trying to figure it out, those are the stories you need to turn to, because those stories are the truth.
Kindra, I want to thank you, because for those listeners out there that have been riding with me since the beginning, you know that I've said it before. I do not send out questions to any guest that I have on the show. I don't. I will not, and I'll continue to not, because I want you to know who Kindra is as opposed to what she does. But I want to show you something real quick. Kindra, are you ready for this?
I don't know.
Are you
Now
ready
I'm
for this?
worried. I'm
Okay,
ready.
watch.
You know what? Yeah.
Okay, what I want you to do, if you're listening or you're watching, I want you to rewind it, and I want you to watch it again. I want you to watch it with a friend, but I want you to write down these words. I want you to write down event, story, response, result. You'll see that every single time that that Kindra answered a question of mine, she had an event that happened in her life. She chose the story, there was the response, and then there was the result. And every single time, and it wasn't coerced. We didn't set up for this, none of that. The next thing that I want you to look at, and I want you to write down, number one, become your story. And I love it because if you noticed, Kindra became her story even more today, because she was like, I'm vanilla, I didn't have anything. And then she went into her story and we were like, you are weird, woman. Like, you had a crazy upbringing. Weird is good. And she not only talks about this in the book, guys, that it's in 3 parts. Number 1 is the become your story. Number 2, the storytelling process. And you did that. You did that every single time. You told yourself for a long time until today that you grew up in a vanilla place. And then you started to look at your story today. And then finally, guys, if you look at this, and she interwove them, that she explored other people's stories and used other people's transformations to be able to inspire her to see that this stuff is possible. I can do, and I can be who I want to be. The reason why I said, are you ready for this, Kindra, is because there's very, very, very few people that live what they're talking about. And I invite you, watch this over and over again, but take the notes. Watch it the first time. You guys are done with it now, but I want you to write these notes down, and I want you to go back, and I want you to listen to Kindra. And then I want you to see every single interview that she does, every single thing on social media, and you have actually found what we're all looking for. When we scratch the surface, that we see the same thing in the dark as we do in the light, and that's what Kindra is. And I want to thank you so much, because honestly, you blew my mind today. Like, there are those things, but I watched them. I mean, I watched them happen, transform, but it was so natural. It was so there. And I want to compliment you, and I want to tell you that you are an inspiration to all of us.
I mean, I can't thank you enough. You took me. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this and revisit all of the stories that you made possible for me to remember, and to even every day get to today see myself a little differently than I did before this conversation. So this was an absolute joy and an honor to be in your presence and get to be here and share this story with you.
I have one ask. When you tell the purple notebook story for the first time in a keynote, I need to know before, because I want to be in the audience.
Okay.
I want to be in the audience. and I'm going to be,
Mhm.
that's it, purple notebook. And if you know, hey, if you invite me to the event and I get there and you're up there and you ain't going to the place, I'm going to be that dude that's like, what about the
You
purple notebook, Kindra?
tell me the notebook story. Yes. Be like, where was it? Where was the story? You left it out just like you left the notebook at school.
So, Kindra, bring us home. And I know you got to do it quick. Bring us home with the I sound like a man story.
Oh, it's so crazy. You were talking about how today you actually sound like a man. And then that reminded me and I said, well, my voice is really low. I've been talking a lot lately too. So it's a little bit worn. And I remember when I was a junior in college, I worked at the Outback Steakhouse in Fargo, North Dakota. I was really good. And I worked there at my father's encouragement because that's where you'll make more tips there than at Applebee's because the price of dinner is more expensive. So if you're getting 20%, I mean, it made a lot of sense. And I remember one of my first days going up to this table and the restaurant opened at 5 and they were there at like 4:45 waiting. It was just this little old couple and they were sitting there and I walked up and they came every whatever Friday at that exact time. They sat in that exact seat and whoever their server usually was, it was me today. And they're like, oh, we usually have Jody. And I'm like, you've got me today. She said, you kind of sound like a man. I was like, okay. And the crazy thing is, there is still a part of me when I listen to myself on podcasts. And I know this isn't about like, oh, you sound different than you sound in your head. I know that. I've had to listen to myself enough to know what I sound like in my head versus on a podcast. So I know that difference. But every time I listen to myself, I'm like, oh gosh, do I sound too much? Like I have this feeling that there's something wrong with my voice. And I'm realizing that it was, I think it started with that. She is definitely dead. Like that is why am I still, she was so old then. Why am I letting this comment from this old lady from the Outback Steakhouse still have any life or say in how I see myself? And that was just one of those moments. And you discover these stories that are like that story lives rent free in my life and makes me question my voice on a daily basis. That one time because I never waited on her again because Jody was back and Jody waited on her. I don't know why Jody did. They were terrible. Or maybe they tipped Jody great and they don't tip me well because they were offended by my masculine voice. I don't know. But why is it that is still a part? Why do I still have that in my head? And so I now have to go and unpack that. And that is what I will do as I leave you here.
Kindra, I want to tell you, it's been a pleasure. Have you told the Outback Steakhouse story on a podcast
No,
before?
Never.
This is exclusive.
I just remembered.
That isn't it. Hey, that's exclusive. We're putting it on DVD. We're going to be selling it at the end of the show. You will get a waterfall campaign. If you don't buy the
and
DVD,
a lip phone, not a flip phone, a lip phone, like DJ Tanner had. That's the other. And a live concert by Casey and JoJo.
Well, everyone out there, you guys know, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know what it's time to do now. Click the links, do all the stuff. But I'm going to tell you, you need to share this with every single person. I'm not saying, like, you need to share it with men, women, children. Like, hide your wives, hide your husbands, everybody. You need to send this out to everyone because everyone needs to understand that their story is so important. And when they start to own it and when they start to construct it, and then when they start to get inspired by other people's stories, we could truly change this world, and it'll all be because of Outback Steakhouse. So I want to thank you. That's going to be our new sponsor, Kindra.
New sponsorship. Oh my God!
I want to thank you though. You have been absolutely phenomenal. And Kindra, you are officially off the hot seat.